And we're live. What's going on, everybody? How you guys doing? So look, I wanted to jump on and switch it up today. I think I mentioned the other time, I never want to be the person who, you see me post, you know what to expect, it's always going to be the same thing. I'm always looking to reinvent myself. And I posted that I was watching this movie, The Shining, and I got this huge response of people being interested. And I thought, when I go look at comments on the great movies, because I'm starting to learn the great movies and the great films, the one main comment I see is people saying, I wish I could go back and watch this movie for the first time. And in my case, it is the first time. So since there's been such a reaction to me watching some of these movies, and there's obviously some interest, I figured I'd hop on and give some brief thoughts on some of these films. I'm not a movie critic. I'm not here to tell you every hidden detail or secret. If you want something like that, an evaluation like that, check out IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes. This is just somebody from a different generation watching a movie that came out before his time, seeing it from maybe a bit of a different perspective and noticing a few different things. So this movie was a lot of fun to watch. Here it is, The Shining, 1980, by Stanley Kubrick, Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall. Of course, about a family led by the father headed out to the Overlook Hotel for a winter maintenance job, featuring Danny Lloyd as the son. So the first thing I noticed when I got into this movie was that it's ahead of its time in a lot of ways, the main way being the camera work. As someone who's more used to 2000s style cinematography, the intro sequence with Stanley Kubrick's work here, where he's following the car around this mountain and it's showing the opening credits, I can't wrap my mind around how they actually managed to pull this off in 1980. I mean, we have the technology today of drones and such being just starting to be used properly in films. And this footage is done much better than most of the current drone stuff I've seen. So right off the bat, this movie is eye-catching. It features beautiful scenery. I'm from out in Canada. We get a lot of snow. We have the Rocky Mountains, so a lot of this stuff is quite familiar looking to me. But that's the fascinating thing that first struck me. This intro piece of camera work is so modern and so ahead of its time, whereas the rest of the movie, it's sequenced like a really, really old film, something from the 50s, something from the 60s, with the fade-outs and fade-ins and the overlapping of the shots. It's sort of filmed in a dreamy, old style, yet the story progression of this film and the script writing it's something that's more modern. It's something that reminds me more of the stuff I'm used to watching today. A lot of movies I watched from the 70s and 80s, I click it and I'm like, oh, well, this is a movie probably from 75, or this is a movie from this year. This one just seems a lot more modern in the way that they're talking. It progresses in such a way that you don't really know exactly what's going to happen, even though this movie could have been very cookie cutter. I'm aware that it didn't follow the Stephen King recipe that he had from his original book. I'm aware Stephen King didn't like this film. But personally, I think Stanley Kubrick gave it a very interesting twist, because you kind of feel like you know what's going to happen, but within about 25 minutes of the movie, you realize you're probably wrong at every turn. The other interesting thing about it is the music. I believe a fully original score. And Kubrick uses this suspenseful, scary music in moments where you would typically see something horrific or shocking happening on the screen in another film. So it brings you into that state of anxiety and wondering what's going to happen next in that moment. But a lot of the times in the first hour or so, even, nothing happens when that music is going on, or nothing visibly happens. I think that's the main thing about this movie. And as I was having my first watch, before I did my research on it, it became apparent to me very quickly that this was one of the movies that things are happening that you're not going to realize until later, or until you actually finish the film and go research it. That became apparent to me. Even the name of the hotel, the Overlook Hotel. I mean, could it be any more obvious that there's details that are being overlooked? So that's another weird thing about this movie. A lot of symbolism. Kubrick says that all of the artwork, pretty much mostly in the buildings, is, if it's showcased in scenes, is representative of something that's going on. I'm not going to get too deep into the symbolism and stuff, but it sort of ties into part of my original interest of this movie. and also why it's so timeless. This movie's so timeless because I've known what it was. I've known sort of the plot. A guy goes crazy with an axe. And I've known, like, by facial recognition, I guess, by looking at them, the actors, but I've never seen this movie. How can a movie transcend so much that I kind of know what happens? I know the movie if you bring it up, but I've never seen it. And a lot of these mentions, of course, were very overt. Simpsons episodes, things along those lines. But a lot of them are less overt and sort of more along the lines of semi-subliminal symbolism. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it because, again, that's not my purpose with this video. But if you look into some of the Disney Pixar symbolism of this movie, it's not just some fan fiction theory. This is actually confirmed. The guy who directed a lot of these Pixar movies, A Bug's Life, Coco, his name is Lee Unkrich, and he's a self-admitted fanatic of The Shining. Self-admitted to the point where he's actually put up on Twitter a link to this website called theoverlookhotel.com. And the director of all these Toy Stories, all this, he runs this website. And he says, everybody has an obsession, this is mine. So if you're interested in looking more into the Disney Pixar symbolism of The Shining in his movies, it's pretty much confirmed. It's not really even a theory. So this is definitely really cool to look at. But again, symbolism that's direct, symbolism that's indirect. This movie really has stood the test of time, and popped up in a lot of ways that you may not have expected. You know, I also like the way that it relentlessly builds tension, this storyline. From the get-go, you know something's up, but you don't know who it's with. Kubrick utilizes the creepy music in the first scene with the chef, whose real name I'm currently forgetting at the moment. But when we're looking from the perspective of Danny, the chef seems like some evil character or some suspicious, weird character because they're playing the music that's sort of eerie and suspenseful. But really, this guy turns out to be one of the protagonists of the story who indirectly saved Danny from Jack. So, you know, again, you keep getting led down these paths. You think that you're on to someone. You think you're on to something. But the second you come to that conclusion, Kubrick completely flips the script and leads you to believe something else. So it's almost like when things start happening around the suspenseful music, you don't even think anything's going to happen because you say, oh, he already got me 5 times with this. Nothing's going to happen. And then, boom, they get you. So, you know, I guess the term psychological thriller definitely applies here. This is a trip. The whole thing is a trip. And again, it's weird. Like, I knew the whole scene of him writing the same sentence. I should have said spoiler alert before this. Of him writing the same sentence over and over again. I knew that was part of this movie, and I knew that was from Simpsons. I've seen that episode. No TV, no beer makes Homer crazy or something. But again, I didn't know where that fell into the plot of The Shining, and it wasn't a spoiler, yet I knew some of the most pivotal scenes. So that's the weird thing about this movie. That being said, there's a lot of subject matter that isn't in popular culture that I found really interesting. So like I say, it doesn't feel like the movie was spoiled for me in any sense, even though I was sort of aware of what went down. By the end of the movie, it's basically a full-on psychological trip. When they showed the dude in the bear costume, that shit freaked me the hell out. I was really confused because my first theory was that the son, Danny, was mentally ill, and we were seeing proof of that through his imaginary friend, and the main proof of evidence was his father's mental breakdown to lead me to conclude that he was mentally ill. But now, you know, a couple minutes later, I didn't think Danny was mentally ill. And then, you know, the fact that the wife, Shelley Duvall, is seeing strange things happening around them, that took me from, okay, this is a guy who's mentally ill with a mentally ill son, to this is a family experiencing strange things all around them. So really just a mind fuck, honestly, just a really fascinating movie. The ending really threw me off, as I think any good ending should. You know, I'm sort of past the point of step A, step B, step C, and we know what's going to happen. I want plot twists. I want to be thrown for a loop. I want to be confused as to how this guy did what, when, and where, because that keeps you interested in the movie. If I can sit and visualize exactly what's going to happen, and the chef would come in and grab the two of them in his arms and save them from Jack and run away into the sunset, that would have just been too predictable. You know, that being said, I was thrown off guard also by Jack Nicholson being frozen at the end in that caricature of him. Yet another thing that I had seen online, I was aware of as a meme, but I didn't even know that was from The Shining. I thought that was another Jack Nicholson movie. So it really tripped me out to see all these like pop culture references culminating, realizing where it came from, and just some of the greatest. I mean, you know, it's like me saying that McDonald's makes some of the greatest fries. I mean, obviously, Stanley Kubrick is going to have some of the greatest directing, but it really stands out. And I thought this was an incredible movie. That was sort of more or less carried by Danny Lloyd with his portrayal of Danny in the movie. So shout out to him. And watching an interview with him as I was doing my research for this as an adult, which he is now, he was actually talking about being good friends with this dude from Pixar, Lee Unkrich, and that they talk all the time on the phone about The Shining, and that Lee is actually going to be making a book about The Shining. So, you know, in terms of like some weird subliminal theories and stuff, this movie has also added fuel to my fire. I thought a lot of this Disney Pixar symbolism stuff was a lot of bullshit. And frankly, more than 50% of the theories on this movie I think are complete bullshit. I think there's a lot of hidden symbolism. It's been made clear to me that Stanley Kubrick, when he does something and puts it in frame, it's done for a reason. But that being said, I think when you get overly critical of certain things, you can make something out of nothing. You know, Jack Nicholson had a bit of spit fly out of his mouth at a passionate scene, and somebody online was trying to say that was a hint towards a sexual act that had happened because he had a liquid coming. I mean, it just gets ridiculous. But some of these theories are interesting, and the fact that there's some credibility to some of them that's been pretty much proven, I found awesome. But I digress. So I wanted to keep this short. I just wanted to give you guys my thoughts. Watching this for the first time as somebody outside of this generation, I mean, what am I going to do? Go back in time and go to the premiere? I mean, this is my way of watching it now. And I'm not going to give my rating of this movie or anything out of 10 because I'm not a movie critic, but I really, really love this film. I love the way that they blended old and new pretty much seamlessly. It felt like I was watching like one of those old, like Partridge Family or so, like what I describe as one of those old shows with the fade-ins and fade-outs, and that sort of like innocent camera work, especially in the main beginning of the movie, mixed with the sinister undertones, I thought was really interesting. Also, the fact that it's a horror movie with many layers. It's a story of mental health. It's a story of spirits and energies and how they sort of latch on to buildings and how things can stick around energy-wise. Whether or not you believe in that is up to you. And it's arguably a story about abuse in some people's eyes. So overall, horrific. I mean, overall scary. There's no really angle of that isn't scary. So I think it's masterfully done. I can't wait to watch some more Kubrick movies. Up next on my list is 2001: A Space Odyssey. I recently watched JFK by Oliver Stone the other night. I'm considering doing a video on that. But I will say that movie reminds me more of current times than it does of the history I was learning about. I'll just leave it there. But leave me a comment. Let me know what movies you want me to check out, potentially talk about. I put posts up and I always go back to them. You guys have suggested me hundreds of movies and I go back to those posts and I do check them out. This was one of them. And thanks for checking it out. We did it live. This is something new. Let me know what you think, man. I got to know what you guys think about this. See if we'll do it again. If you're tuning in, you're watching the first pilot. Appreciate you guys, man. Much love and good night.